The morning sky over the Nevada desert was clear and empty, the kind of blue that made pilots relax. Then, at 0642 local time, every radar station on the western coast of the United States lit up at once. A shape appeared out of nowhere, as if it had stepped out of thin air. It was not a meteor. It was not a drone. It was a ship, and it was falling toward Earth in a straight, controlled line. Colonel Sarah Voss was in the command center at Nellis Air Force Base when the alarms went off. She had been drinking her second coffee of the day, and she put the cup down so fast that it spilled across the table. Nobody noticed. Every eye in the room was locked on the main screen. "Talk to me," she said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were not. "Object is decelerating," said Lieutenant Park, a young radar officer who looked like he had not slept in 2 days. "No visible engine flare. No heat signature that matches any known propulsion system. Ma'am, this thing is just slowing down, like it doesn't care about physics. Trajectory? Heading for the flats outside Groom Lake. It's not aiming at a city. It's not aiming at a base, not directly. It's coming down an open desert." That was the first strange thing. Whatever this was, it was not trying to hide, and it was not trying to hit a target. Colonel Voss picked up the red phone, the one that connected her straight to Space Command, and within minutes, the entire chain of command from her office to the Pentagon to the White House was awake and listening. The ship landed at 0715. It did not crash. It touched down as gently as a leaf falling onto water, kicking up only a small cloud of dust. Cameras from 3 different surveillance satellites and 2 high-altitude drones captured the moment. The ship was shaped like nothing anyone in the room had ever seen. It was long and curved, the color of dark pearl, with lines running across its hull that seemed to glow faintly, like veins carrying light instead of blood. It was easily the size of an aircraft carrier, but it had landed on legs that folded out from its underside, thin and elegant, like the legs of a great insect. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. The ship sat there in the desert, silent, glowing softly. Military units were already moving, F-22 jets scrambling from 3 different bases, ground troops forming a perimeter 5 miles out, satellites repositioning for a better view. Then the ship spoke. It was not a radio signal at first. It was something stranger. Every phone, every radio, every television in a 50-mile radius switched on at once, showing only static, and then a voice came through, using an old satellite frequency that had not been used in over a decade. "People of Earth. We are not here to fight. We ask only to speak. We come in peace." The voice was calm, almost gentle, and it spoke English with no accent at all, as if it had learned the language from books rather than from people. Within the hour, the words, "We come in peace," were being repeated on every news channel on the planet. Some people cried, some people prayed, some people ran to the stores to buy food and water, certain that this was the end of the world. In the command center, Colonel Voss was less interested in the message and more interested in what her sensors were telling her. She stood beside a young analyst named Ray Chen, who ran the base's deep scan systems, the machines that could look inside a target and tell you what it was made of, what kind of engines it carried, what kind of weapons might be hidden inside. "Ray, give me the internal scan." "Running it now, ma'am." "Deep radar is having trouble. The hull is layered strangely, some kind of material we don't have a name for, but I'm getting some readings from the core." "And?" Ray frowned at his screen, then frowned harder, then looked up at her with an expression she did not like at all. "Ma'am, this doesn't make sense." "Explain it to me anyway." "The reactor signature inside that ship, it's not alien. I mean, the ship itself. Sure, everything on the outside is completely unknown to us. But there's something inside, buried near the center, and it's giving off an energy pattern that matches something in our own database. It matches a fusion drive class we use. Specifically," he typed quickly, pulling up a comparison chart. "Specifically, it matches the drive signature of a Zephyr-class warship. One of ours." The room went quiet. "That's not possible," Colonel Voss said. "We don't sell that technology. We don't even export it to our allies. Are you telling me there's a piece of our own military hardware sitting inside an alien ship that just landed in Nevada?" "I'm telling you the sensors say yes, and it's not just a piece, ma'am. The energy output, it's too large for a piece of equipment. It's too large for a weapon. If I had to guess, And I mean, if you forced me to bet money on it, I'd say there is an entire ship sitting inside that alien vessel. A human warship. Whole. Powered. Maybe even crewed. Colonel Voss felt her stomach drop. She had spent 20 years in the Air Force, and she thought she had seen every kind of surprise the job could throw at her. She was wrong. Which ship? Can you identify it? Ray's fingers moved across the keyboard, cross-referencing the energy signature against every known vessel in the Navy's registry, then against retired ships, then against ships listed as lost. It took almost 10 minutes, and by the end of it, his face had gone pale. Ma'am, the signature is a 92% match for the USS Kestrel. The Kestrel was lost 31 years ago, Voss said slowly. It went missing during a deep patrol mission out past the lunar orbit. No wreckage was ever found. No survivors were ever found. It was declared lost, with all 240 crew members aboard. Yes, ma'am, that's the one. Nobody in the room spoke for a long moment. Outside, the alien ship continued to sit in the desert, quiet and glowing, waiting. Word moved up the chain of command fast. Within 2 hours, a joint task force was assembled, made up of military officers, scientists, and a small handful of diplomats who had, until that morning, spent their careers working on much smaller problems, like trade disputes and border negotiations. None of them had trained for first contact with an alien species. None of them had trained for the possibility that a ship lost 3 decades ago might somehow be involved. At the center of this task force was Dr. Elena Marsh, a linguist and cultural expert who had been pulled out of a conference in Geneva and flown across the world in record time. She had gray hair tied back in a tight bun, and eyes that missed nothing. When she arrived at the desert perimeter, she looked at the alien ship for a long time before saying anything. "It's beautiful," she finally said. "Whoever built this understood art as well as engineering." "That's not the part that worries me," said General Marcus Webb, the man now in charge of the operation. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that had stopped smiling somewhere around his second combat tour. "The part that worries me is the ship inside the ship." "You believe them? That they come in peace?" "I believe that something out there is smart enough to reach Earth without us seeing them coming. I believe they landed in open desert instead of a city, which tells me they don't want a war. But I also believe that whoever they are carrying one of our lost warships around like a trophy, and until I understand why, I am not going to relax." The negotiations began 3 hours after landing. A section of the alien hull slid open without a sound, revealing a ramp that lowered gently to the sand. No weapons came out. No soldiers came out. Instead, a single figure walked down the ramp, tall and thin, wrapped in a robe of shifting silver cloth that seemed to catch the desert light and scatter it into small rainbows. Its face was mostly hidden beneath a hood, but what could be seen looked almost human, except for the eyes, which were too large and too dark, like pools of oil. Dr. Marsh stepped forward to meet it, flanked by 2 armed soldiers who stayed several paces behind her, as agreed. General Webb watched from a command truck half a mile away, his hand resting on a radio that could call in an airstrike within 90 seconds if things went wrong. "I am Dr. Elena Marsh," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I speak for the people of Earth in this meeting. Thank you for landing somewhere safe." The alien tilted its head slightly, a gesture that seemed almost curious, almost human. "I am called Threll. I speak for my people, the coalition of the Vantiri stars. We have traveled a great distance to reach you. We ask for peace between our peoples." "We would welcome peace," Dr. Marsh said carefully. "But I must ask you something first, and I ask it honestly, because honesty will serve us both better than politeness. Our sensors have detected something inside your ship, something that matches the signature of one of our own warships, a ship that was lost 31 years ago with all of its crew. Can you explain this to us?" For the first time, Threll's calm expression seemed to shift. It was hard to read alien body language, but Dr. Marsh had spent her whole career reading the small signs that people gave away without meaning to, and she was almost certain that what she saw on Threll's face was something like sorrow. "Yes," Threll said quietly, "I can explain. And I think, once you understand, you will see why peace between us is more important than either of us yet realizes." Threll raised one long hand, and behind it, deep inside the alien ship, a section of the inner hull began to glow. revealing through some kind of projection a large chamber. Floating in that chamber, held in place by pale blue light, was a ship that every person watching immediately recognized. It was smaller than the alien vessel around it, gray and battered, its hull marked with dents and burns that told a story of battles long past. Painted faintly on its side, barely visible beneath years of wear, were the letters USS Kestrel. 31 of your years ago, Threll said, this vessel was found by one of our scout patrols, far beyond the edge of your solar system, drifting without power, its crew in a state your species calls stasis, a kind of long sleep used to survive extended emergencies. We did not attack it. We did not capture it as a prize of war. We rescued it, because it had been damaged by something that we too have reason to fear. General Webb's voice crackled over the radio in Dr. Marsh's ear, sharp and urgent. Ask them if the crew is alive. Dr. Marsh repeated the question aloud. Threll's dark eyes seemed to soften. Yes, 211 of the original 240 crew members survive. They have slept for many years, while our healers worked to repair the damage done to their bodies and their ship. We did not wake them until we were certain they would live. We bring them home to you now, not as prisoners, but as proof of our intentions. We ask for peace, and we return your people to you as the first gift of that peace. A silence fell over the desert, broken only by the wind moving across the sand. Dr. Marsh felt her throat tighten. Behind her, she could hear General Webb's voice on the radio, quieter now, almost disbelieving. Confirm that. Confirm the crew is alive, all of it, right now. But there was more, and Threll was not finished speaking. There is one more thing you must know, the alien said, its voice growing heavier, more careful. The enemy that damaged your ship, the one your Kestrel fought against before it was lost, is not gone. It is the same enemy that threatens my people even now. It is the reason we have crossed the stars to find you. We did not come only to return what was lost. We came because we need you. Because in the logs of your ship, in the story your own crew told us during their long recovery, we found something we had lost hope of ever finding among the stars. What is that? Dr. Marsh asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Threll looked past her, toward the battered gray ship floating inside the glowing chamber, toward the 211 sleeping humans who had drifted through the void for 3 decades and were only now coming home. We found a species willing to fight when there was no hope of winning. We found the USS Kestrel's crew defending a research colony of children, ours, not yours, against an enemy fleet 10 times their size, and we found that they did not retreat, even when retreat would have saved them. They stayed until we could evacuate every last child. That is why your ship was damaged. That is why they drifted, powerless, waiting for a rescue that almost never came. Threll paused, and its next words were quiet, almost reverent. We owe your species a debt that cannot be measured, and we are afraid, Dr. Marsh, that very soon, we will need you to fight beside us again. Far above the desert, unseen by any radar, unnoticed by any satellite, something vast and dark had already begun moving through the outer edges of the solar system, drawn by the very same signal that had led the Vantiri scouts to Earth 31 years before. The peace that Threll offered was real, but so was the danger that followed close behind it, and neither the humans standing in that desert, nor the 211 sleeping crew members of the Kestrel, yet understood how little time was left before that danger arrived. Dr. Marsh turned back toward the command truck, her heart pounding, and gave the order that would change the course of human history. Wake the crew, bring them home, and someone get General Webb on the line. We are going to need every ship we have. The desert wind picked up, scattering sand across the ramp of the alien vessel, and somewhere deep inside that glowing hull, in the ship that had waited 31 years to come home, the first of the Kestrel's crew began, at last, to open their eyes. The first crew member to wake up was a woman named Captain Diane Reyes, and she woke up fighting. Her eyes snapped open inside a pod of soft blue light, and her body, weak from 31 years of stasis sleep, still tried to sit up and reach for a weapon that was not there. Alien medical staff, tall and careful, backed away from her pod to give her room. It took several seconds for her mind to understand that she was not being attacked, that the last thing she remembered, an enemy fleet closing in around her ship while children screamed over the comm channels of a burning colony, was not happening right now. Report, she said. her voice cracked and dry from disuse. "Someone give me a status report." No one answered right away, because no one on the alien ship spoke military English the way she needed to hear it. It was Dr. Marsh who answered, standing at the edge of the medical bay, with General Webb beside her, both of them having been allowed aboard the alien vessel under careful, tense negotiation. "Captain Reyes," Dr. Marsh said gently. "My name is Dr. Elena Marsh. You are safe. You and your crew have been asleep for a long time." Captain Reyes turned her head slowly, taking in the strange room, the alien machines, the two humans standing near her pod wearing uniforms she did not recognize. "How long?" 31 years. For a moment, Reyes said nothing. Then she closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, there was something hard and controlled in her expression, the look of a commander forcing herself to accept impossible news, because there was no other choice. "My crew? 211 of your 240 are alive and beginning to wake, same as you," General Webb said. "I'm sorry to tell you that the other 29 did not survive the journey." Reyes closed her eyes again, and this time she stayed like that for a long moment, her jaw tight. 29 names ran through her mind, 29 faces she had commanded, 29 families back on Earth who had waited 31 years for news that would now finally come. "I need to speak to whoever is in charge here. Human side first. Then I want answers from our hosts." General Webb stepped closer. "I'm in charge of this operation, Captain. General Marcus Webb, United States Space Command. And for what it's worth, welcome home." Reyes studied him for a long moment, sizing him up the way soldiers do, then gave a small nod. "Thank you, General. Now somebody help me stand. I've been asleep long enough." Over the following 2 days, the world tried to process what had happened. News networks ran non-stop coverage of the return of the Kestrel, showing footage of the ship being carefully moved out of the alien vessel and lowered onto the desert sand under human supervision. Families of the lost crew, many of whom had grieved for 3 decades, were flown in, under tight security, to reunite with sons, daughters, husbands, and wives, who had not aged a single day since the moment their ship went dark. It was not all joy. Some families had passed away in the years since the Kestrel disappeared. Some crew members woke up to learn that parents they remembered clearly were long gone, that children they had left as toddlers were now adults with children of their own. Dr. Marsh spent long hours simply sitting with crew members, helping them absorb 31 years of missing history in the space of a single conversation. But even as the personal stories unfolded, the larger question remained, and it grew heavier with each passing hour. What did the Vantiri actually want? And what enemy were they so afraid of that they had crossed the galaxy to ask humanity for help? General Webb called a private meeting on the 3rd day, held inside a secure briefing room at Nellis, away from cameras and away from politics, at least for a little while. Around the table sat Dr. Marsh, Captain Reyes, who had insisted on attending despite doctors telling her to rest, Ray Chen, the sensor analyst, and Threll, who had been allowed to leave the alien ship under heavy but respectful escort. "Let's start simple," General Webb said. "Threll, tell us about the enemy. Everything. No half answers." Threll folded its long hands together on the table, its dark eyes moving slowly around the room, before settling on Webb. "They call themselves nothing that translates cleanly into your language. We call them the Hollow, because that is what they leave behind. They are not a single species, not in the way you or I understand the word. They are more like a process, a hunger that spreads from world to world, absorbing the technology, the biology, and in some cases the minds of everything they conquer." "Absorbing minds?" Dr. Marsh asked quietly. "The Hollow do not simply destroy," Threll said. "They convert. Populations that resist are usually killed outright. Populations that surrender are sometimes changed, turned into extensions of the Hollow's collective will. It is, by most accounts, a fate worse than death, though I understand that is a phrase your species uses as well." Captain Reyes leaned forward, her arms crossed. "We fought something at that colony 31 years ago. Big ships, dark hulls, no visible crew compartments that we could find in our scans. They didn't communicate. They didn't negotiate. They just kept coming, wave after wave, like they didn't care how many ships they lost as long as they eventually won." She looked at Threll. "That was them?" "Yes," Threll said. That was a hollow incursion fleet, a relatively small one by their standards. Your ship's crew defended a colony of 800 Vantiri children and their caretakers against that fleet for 11 hours, long enough for evacuation transports to escape with everyone alive. Your ship was left crippled, drifting, and by every calculation my people made, you should not have survived. And yet you did, and you gave my people 11 hours that let 800 children grow up to become teachers, scientists, parents. We do not forget a debt like that. The room was quiet. Ray Chen finally spoke, his voice careful. So if this is a debt of honor, why are you here now? Why not just leave us alone, at peace, and go on with your lives? Threll's expression shifted again, that same alien approximation of sorrow that Dr. Marsh had noticed on the first day. Because the Hollow do not stop, and they do not forget either. Since that battle, 31 years ago, we have fought them 17 more times. We have lost 4 inhabited worlds completely. We have lost countless ships, countless lives. Our scouts detected increased Hollow activity 6 months ago, moving in a pattern that suggests they are preparing for a larger offensive, one aimed not just at the worlds we have already lost, but at the core of Vantiri space itself. If that offensive succeeds, we will not survive it. And you think Earth can help? General Webb said slowly. I think Earth already has helped, once. More than any other ally we have found among the stars, Threll said. But that is not the only reason we came. During the years your crew slept aboard our medical vessels, we studied the technology in your ship. We studied the accounts your crew gave once they recovered enough to speak with us. And we came to understand something important. Your species is young, compared to many of the civilizations out here, but you have something the Hollow have never learned to predict. What's that? Captain Reyes asked. You do not calculate the odds before deciding to fight, Threll said simply. Every species we have approached for alliance in the last decade has asked us for guaranteed victory before committing forces. Every species has demanded assurances, treaties, careful calculations of risk versus reward. Your ship's crew defended children they had never met, from a species they had never seen before, without knowing if help would ever arrive, without any guarantee of survival. That is rare. That is, frankly, valuable beyond anything we can offer you in return. General Webb sat back in his chair, arms folded, his expression unreadable. You want us to fight your war. I want to offer you a choice, Threll said carefully. I want to be honest with you, General, in a way that I understand may cost us your trust. The Hollow do not only threaten Vantiri space. Our scouts have detected signs, faint but growing, that Hollow scouting patterns are beginning to extend toward this region of the galaxy, toward your solar system. It may be 5 years before they arrive here. It may be 20. But I do not believe, and my people do not believe, that Earth will remain unnoticed by the Hollow forever. Alliance or no alliance. We came in peace, and we came to return your people, because it was the right thing to do. But we also came because we believe that if we fight this threat together, and win, both our peoples survive. If we do not fight together, I fear that eventually, neither of us will survive at all. The room absorbed this in heavy silence. Dr. Marsh was the first to speak. You're telling us, this isn't a request for charity. This is survival, for both species. Yes, Threll said. I regret that I could not simply say this on the first day, in the desert, in front of your cameras. I feared it would be seen as a threat, or as manipulation, rather than the truth it is. I chose to let you first meet the crew of the Kestrel, to let you see for yourselves what kind of people we found drifting in the dark, before I asked you to consider a harder truth. Captain Reyes let out a long breath and rubbed her eyes, the exhaustion of 31 years of sleep and 3 days of impossible news finally showing on her face. For what it's worth, General, I believe him. I was there. I saw what those things did to that colony before we managed to hold the line. I don't need alien logic to tell me they're a threat. I lived it. General Webb was quiet for a long moment, staring at the table, his mind clearly working through implications that stretched far beyond this room, far beyond his own authority. Finally, he looked up at Threll. This isn't a decision I can make alone. Earth doesn't have one government, one voice. You're going to have to make this case again, to a lot more people than just us, and some of them are going to be a lot less friendly than we've been. I understand, Threll said. I have already been informed that representatives from your United Nations wish to speak with me within the week. I am prepared for that conversation to be difficult. It's going to be more than difficult, Webb said. There are governments out there right now arguing about whether your ship is a threat, whether this whole return of the Kestrel is some kind of trick, whether we should be preparing for war instead of alliance talks. You've got people terrified, and terrified people don't always make good decisions. Threll's dark eyes settled on Webb, calm despite the warning in his voice. I do not blame them for their fear. Fear is often wise. In the beginning, I only ask that Earth take enough time to see the truth clearly, before fear alone decides an answer that will affect generations. Later that night, after the meeting had ended and Threll had been escorted back to the alien vessel, Captain Reyes found herself standing outside the medical bay, where the last of her crew were finishing their recovery. She watched through a window as a young ensign, barely 23 years old when the Kestrel went dark, now technically 54, though his body had not aged a day, sat on the edge of his bed talking quietly with a woman who introduced herself as his daughter, a woman he had never met, born after his ship disappeared, now older than he remembered his own mother being. Dr. Marsh came to stand beside her. It's a lot to process, for all of you. It is, Reyes agreed. But you know what the strange part is? Sitting in that meeting, listening to Threll talk about children we saved 31 years ago, about a war we didn't even know was still going on. I don't feel confused about what to do next. I feel exactly the way I felt right before we made the call to hold the line at that colony. And what way is that? Reyes looked out at the desert night, at the distant glow of the alien ship still sitting where it had landed, and beyond it, at the stars scattered across the black sky, more of them visible out here than in any city. Somewhere out among those stars, an enemy was already moving, and somewhere among those stars, more Vantiri children were waiting to find out if humanity would answer the call a second time. Ready, she said quietly. I feel ready. Whatever Earth decides, my crew and I already made our choice, 31 years ago. We just didn't know it would take this long for the rest of the world to catch up. Far above them, in orbit unseen by any telescope, pointed the wrong direction. A single dark shape drifted silently past the edge of the solar system, patient, watching, already sending back a signal that would take weeks to reach the depths of hollow space. The countdown that Threll feared, the one that measured the years until the hollow noticed Earth, had already begun ticking down faster than anyone in that desert command room yet understood. The General Assembly Hall in New York was packed beyond its normal limits. Extra chairs brought in for delegates who did not usually attend general sessions, but had suddenly found this one impossible to miss. Cameras from every major network on the planet lined the back wall. Outside, on the streets of Manhattan, thousands of people had gathered, some holding signs that said, "Welcome our new friends," others holding signs that said, "No alien wars," and a surprising number simply holding signs that said, in large letters, "We told you so," apparently satisfied that decades of alien conspiracy theories had finally been proven correct. Threll stood at the podium, alone, without armed escort, a choice that had been debated fiercely by Vantiri and human security teams alike, before finally being approved. Dr. Marsh sat in the front row, close enough to step in if the language became difficult, but Threll had insisted on speaking without a translator crutch, wanting the delegates to hear the words directly. I understand, Threll began, that many of you are afraid. I understand that some of you believe my people orchestrated the disappearance of your Kestrel 31 years ago, in order to create this exact moment, a debt of gratitude that we could later use to pull your species into a war that is not yours to fight. I cannot prove a negative. I cannot prove that we did not plan this. I can only offer you the truth as we understand it, and ask you to weigh that truth honestly. A representative from a large European nation stood up almost immediately, not waiting for the formal question period. And if we say no, if Earth chooses not to involve itself in a war among the stars that has nothing to do with us, what happens then? Then nothing happens between our peoples but continued peace, as we have already offered, Threll said. We will not force an alliance, we will not threaten you for refusing one. If Earth chooses to remain uninvolved, we will honor that choice, and we will still return home, grateful for the chance to reunite your people with the crew of the Kestrel. And the Hollow? The representative pressed. You said they might reach our solar system in 5 to 20 years. If we refuse your alliance, will you at least warn us when they come? Yes, Threll said simply. That is not conditional on alliance. It is simply right. This answer seemed to surprise several delegates, who had clearly expected something closer to a threat, some kind of pressure tactic hidden beneath the polite language. A representative from an East Asian nation raised her hand next, and when called upon, asked the question that was, in many ways, the heart of the entire debate. What exactly are you asking us for? Ships? Soldiers? Weapons? Be specific, because vague promises of alliance mean very little when we are being asked to consider sending our people to die in a war among the stars. Threll paused, seeming to consider the question carefully before answering. We are not asking Earth to send fleets into Vantiri space immediately, nor are we asking for soldiers to die in battles that are not yet Earth's own. What we are asking, in this early stage, is for cooperation, shared intelligence about hollow movement patterns, joint development of detection technology, so that both our peoples can see the hollow coming from further away, with more warning. And, should Earth eventually choose it, joint military exercises, so that if the day comes when the hollow do reach this solar system, human forces and Vantiri forces will already know how to fight beside each other, rather than learning on a battlefield where mistakes cost lives. And in exchange? Another delegate asked. What does Earth receive, beyond the return of the Kestrel's crew, which you have already given us? Access to Vantiri technology that could accelerate human medicine, energy production, and space travel by decades, Threll said. Access to star charts covering a region of the galaxy your species has not yet been able to explore. And, should the alliance eventually deepen, the friendship of a civilization that has existed among the stars for over 4,000 of your years, and that has learned, through hard experience, many lessons your species has not yet had the chance to learn on your own. The debate continued for 6 more hours. Some delegates argued passionately in favor of the alliance, pointing to the return of the Kestrel's crew as undeniable proof of Vantiri good faith. Others argued just as passionately against it, warning that Earth was being maneuvered into a war it did not yet understand, dragged along by gratitude and fear rather than clear thinking. A representative from a South American nation gave a long speech about the danger of trusting any power, human or alien, that arrived promising peace, while quietly measuring how useful your species might be in a fight that was not originally yours. Captain Reyes, watching from a private viewing room set aside for Kestrel crew members who wished to observe the debate, found herself gripping the arms of her chair tighter with each argument against the alliance. Beside her, a young lieutenant named Marcus Ito, who had woken from stasis only 6 days earlier, finally spoke what several of the crew were clearly thinking. They weren't there, he said quietly. Every single one of them arguing against this. They weren't there. They didn't see what those things do to a colony full of kids. They're arguing about numbers and politics, and meanwhile there's a war out there that already cost us 29 of our own people, and it's not going to wait for the UN to finish debating. They have to debate, Reyes said, though her voice carried little conviction. That's how this works. Nobody gets to make this decision alone. Not even the president. Not even the Secretary General. It has to be slow, because it's permanent. I know, Ito said. Doesn't make it easier to watch. By the time the vote was called, the sun had set over New York City, and the crowds outside had thinned but not disappeared. The vote itself was not a simple yes or no, but a carefully worded resolution proposing exactly what Threll had outlined: shared intelligence, joint technology development on detection and defense systems, and the beginning of limited joint military exercises, with the explicit condition that any deeper commitment, any sending of human forces into active combat, would require a separate and much more difficult vote in the future. The resolution passed, though not by an overwhelming margin. 131 nations voted in favor. 42 voted against. 20 abstained. It was enough. Earth had chosen, cautiously and with clear limits, to begin walking down the path toward alliance with the Vantiri coalition. 3 months passed after that vote, and in those months, the world began to change in ways both large and small. Joint research facilities were established in 6 countries, staffed by human scientists and Vantiri engineers, working side by side, translating alien technology into forms that human industry could actually produce. Early detection arrays, built from a combination of human radio astronomy and Vantiri sensor technology, were installed at listening posts around the globe, designed to catch the earliest possible warning of hollow activity approaching the solar system. Captain Reyes and the surviving crew of the Kestrel, after extensive medical clearance and a great deal of difficult personal adjustment, were given a new assignment, one that none of them had expected, but all of them, to a person, accepted without hesitation. They would form the core of Earth's first joint task force, training alongside Vantiri military advisors to prepare human forces for the kind of warfare the Hollow represented, warfare that most of Earth's existing doctrine had never been designed to handle. It was during this training period that Ray Chen, still working as a sensor analyst but now assigned to the Joint Task Force, made a discovery that would prove far more urgent than anyone expected. He was running a routine calibration test on the new detection array installed outside Colorado Springs, comparing its readings against the array's twin station in orbit, when he noticed a discrepancy that should not have existed. A faint signal, barely above background noise, appearing and disappearing at the very edge of the array's range, in a pattern that did not match any known asteroid, comet, or piece of space debris. He brought it to Threll first, since the Vantiri had far more experience interpreting these kinds of readings than any human analyst yet did. Threll studied the data for a long time, running it through translation software that converted the readings into a format more familiar to Vantiri sensor technology, and when it finished, Threll's expression shifted into something Ray had not seen before. Not sorrow this time. Something closer to alarm. This pattern, Threll said slowly, matches Hollow Scout signatures, small, low-power vessels, sent ahead of a larger force to survey a target system before a full incursion begins. Ray felt his mouth go dry. You're telling me there's a Hollow Scout ship already in our solar system? I am telling you, Threll said, that there may be more than one. This pattern has likely been present for weeks, possibly months, simply too faint for your existing systems to catch before now. The good news, if there is good news, is that scout vessels rarely engage directly. Their purpose is reconnaissance, not conquest. They will observe, gather what data they can, and report back to a larger Hollow force. And the bad news? Threll turned to look at Ray directly, its dark eyes heavy with the weight of the answer it was about to give. The bad news is that if a Hollow Scout has already observed your solar system closely enough to be detected by our combined sensor network, then it has almost certainly already seen your planet. Seen your ships, seen enough to report back that Earth exists, that Earth is inhabited, and that Earth is now allied with the very species the Hollow have spent decades trying to erase from the stars. Threll paused. I had hoped we would have more time before this happened, Ray Chen. I do not believe we have as much time as I hoped. Within the hour, General Webb had been notified, and within 2 hours, the Joint Task Force command staff, human and Vantiri alike, had been called into an emergency session. Captain Reyes arrived at that meeting, already half expecting the news. Some instinct honed over years of command, telling her that the calm months of training and preparation were about to come to an abrupt end. She was right. Threll laid out the sensor data, the pattern matching, the grim implication that a Hollow scouting presence had likely already reported Earth's location, and its new alliance, back toward whatever force was gathering beyond the edge of Vantiri space. How long, General Webb asked, before an actual incursion force could arrive, if that report has already been sent? Threll considered the question carefully, running calculations against everything known about Hollow fleet movement patterns from 17 previous engagements. Based on the distances involved, and assuming the Hollow respond to this report with anything resembling the urgency they have shown toward other systems that hosted Vantiri allies, I would estimate no less than 8 months, possibly as little as 6, if they consider Earth's alliance with us a priority target, rather than a routine expansion. Captain Reyes felt the old, familiar tightness settle into her chest, the same feeling she remembered from 31 years ago, standing on the bridge of the Kestrel, as enemy ships appeared on her scopes faster than her crew could count them. 6 to 8 months, to prepare an entire planet for a war, most people don't even believe is coming yet. Yes, Threll said quietly. I am sorry. I know this is not the timeline anyone hoped for. General Webb looked around the room, at the assembled officers, human and Vantiri, all of them silent, all of them absorbing the same terrible math. Then he stood up straight, squared his shoulders, and spoke in the voice of a man who had spent his entire career preparing for exactly this kind of impossible moment. Then we stop calling this preparation, he said, and we start calling it what it actually is. We are at war, whether the rest of the world knows it yet or not, and we have less than 8 months to get ready. Captain Reyes, Threll, I want a full briefing on holo tactics on my desk by tomorrow morning. Everybody else, get some sleep tonight, because after today, I don't think any of us are going to get much of it for a long, long time. Outside the briefing room windows, the sky over Colorado had turned dark, stars beginning to emerge one by one across the deepening blue. Somewhere among those stars, unseen, a holo scout ship had already turned away from the solar system, carrying its report back toward a waiting fleet, and the countdown that had begun the moment the Kestrel's crew opened their eyes had just gotten very much shorter. Within a week of General Webb's declaration, the Joint Task Force stopped being a quiet research project buried inside classified briefings and became the most important program on the planet. Governments that had voted against the alliance just months earlier now scrambled to join it, unwilling to be left without protection if the holo truly were coming. Factories that once built cars and commercial airliners were retooled almost overnight to produce components for orbital defense platforms, guided by Vantiri engineering specifications that human industry adapted and, in several cases, improved upon within weeks. Captain Reyes found herself at the center of this effort, not because she wanted the responsibility, but because there was no one else on Earth who had actually commanded a ship in combat against the holo. She was promoted to Admiral, a rank she accepted with visible discomfort, and given command of what was now being called the Kestrel Fleet, Earth's first true space combat force, built around the salvaged and heavily upgraded hull of her original ship. "It doesn't feel right," she admitted to Dr. Marsh one evening, standing in the observation deck of the new orbital shipyard above Earth, watching dozens of half-built vessels take shape against the black of space. 31 years ago, I was a captain, with 240 people under my command. Now they've got me responsible for the whole fleet, and half these ships aren't even finished yet. You're the only person on this planet who's actually fought the enemy we're facing, Dr. Marsh said. That makes you exactly the right person for this, whether it feels right or not. Training with the Vantiri proved to be its own kind of battle. Vantiri military doctrine, refined over decades of fighting the holo, emphasized caution, coordinated retreat when necessary, and preservation of force above almost everything else. Human military instructors, drawn from air forces and navies around the world, brought a very different instinct to the table, one built on centuries of history where holding a line, even at terrible cost, had sometimes been the only thing standing between victory and disaster. The two philosophies clashed constantly during joint exercises. Vantiri commanders were visibly uncomfortable watching human pilots push simulated engagements past the point where Vantiri doctrine called for withdrawal. Human officers, in turn, grew frustrated with what some privately called too much retreating in Vantiri tactical planning, though few said it openly, out of respect for the losses the Vantiri had already suffered. It was Threll, working closely with Admiral Reyes during a tense training debrief in the 4th month, who finally put a name to what was happening. "Your species does not calculate the odds the way mine does," Threll said, reviewing simulation data that showed a human pilot holding position against overwhelming simulated holo numbers, buying time for a transport of civilian evacuees, exactly as the Kestrel had done 31 years before. "By every measure my people use, that pilot should have retreated. The simulation marked her as destroyed. And yet, in the simulation, every evacuee ship escaped." "That's the whole point," Reyes said. "Sometimes the mission isn't about the pilot surviving. It's about what the pilot's sacrifice buys everyone else." "I understand this intellectually," Threll admitted. "I have understood it since the day we found your ship drifting, powerless, its entire crew nearly dead, because they made exactly that same choice 31 years ago. But understanding it and training my own commanders to trust it, to build tactics around it without treating it as reckless, that has proven more difficult than I expected." "Maybe that's the trade," Reyes said. "You teach us caution. We teach you what it looks like to hold a line even when the math says you shouldn't. Put those two things together, and maybe we build something neither of our species could manage alone." Threll considered this for a long moment, and something that might have been the Vantiri equivalent of a smile crossed its face. "Perhaps that is exactly the alliance we should be building, Admiral. Not one side teaching the other, but both sides learning. That philosophy slowly took hold across the Joint Task Force in the months that followed. New combat doctrine emerged, blending Vantiri caution and long-range coordination with human willingness to hold difficult positions when the stakes demanded it. Simulated engagements, run thousands of times across increasingly complex scenarios, began to show survival rates and mission success rates climbing steadily higher than either species had achieved fighting the Hollow alone. Meanwhile, the detection network expanded rapidly. Ray Chen, promoted to lead the Joint Sensor Division, oversaw the installation of nearly 40 new listening stations across the solar system, from orbital platforms around Earth to deep space relays positioned near Jupiter and beyond. The early warning time the network provided grew from mere hours, in the case of the first scout ship detection, to what analysts estimated would eventually be several days once the full network came online. It was Ray who caught the second warning sign, 6 months into the preparation window, and this time there was no ambiguity in the data at all. He was monitoring the deep space relay stationed near the orbit of Neptune when the readings spiked. Not the faint, flickering signature of a scout ship this time, but something far larger, far more definite. He called Admiral Reyes directly, skipping the usual chain of reporting because there was no time to waste. "Admiral, I need you to see this right now." Reyes arrived at the sensor command center within minutes, her uniform still half-buttoned, having been pulled straight from a briefing. Ray showed her the data, a cluster of energy signatures moving steadily inward from the outer edge of the solar system, far too large and too coordinated to be anything other than what everyone had been dreading. "How many ships?" Reyes asked. "Best estimate, based on signature strength and how it's splitting across our sensor coverage, somewhere between 40 and 60 vessels," Ray said. "Admiral, this isn't a scout probe, this is a fleet. Time to Earth orbit?" Ray's hands were shaking slightly as he ran the calculation, but his voice stayed steady. "At their current speed, and assuming they don't accelerate further, which Vantiri combat data suggests they will, 11 days, maybe less." Reyes felt the floor seem to tilt beneath her, though she did not let it show on her face. 11 days. 6 months of preparation, and the Hollow had arrived 2 months earlier than Threll's most cautious estimate, and with a fleet larger than the Joint Task Force's simulations had planned for. She turned to the communications officer standing nearby. "Get me General Webb, the Joint Chiefs, and Threll, right now, all on the same call. And get the fleet to battle stations. I want every ship we have capable of flying, within 6 hours." Word spread through the Joint Task Force with terrifying speed, and from there, despite every effort to control the information, it spread to the public within a day. Panic was inevitable, and it came in waves. Cities seeing runs on grocery stores and gas stations, stock markets falling sharply, some governments declaring states of emergency even before a single Hollow ship had entered the solar system. But something else happened too, something that surprised even Threll, who had watched several other species face this exact moment of realization, the moment when an abstract, distant threat became an undeniable, immediate one. Volunteers began showing up at recruitment stations by the tens of thousands. Engineers who had spent the last 6 months building defense platforms worked triple shifts without complaint, refusing to go home even when ordered to rest. Private companies that had spent decades competing fiercely against each other in the space industry suddenly began sharing patents, resources, and manufacturing capacity, without hesitation, racing to finish incomplete ships and defense platforms before the 11-day window closed. Admiral Reyes stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned flagship, a vessel 3 times the size of the original Kestrel, built using a combination of human shipbuilding expertise and Vantiri engine technology, and watched through the viewport as the rest of Earth's assembled fleet took formation around her. It was not the fleet she had once imagined commanding, decades ago, before her original ship went dark above a burning Vantiri colony. It was something new, something built in desperation and hope in equal measure, crewed by humans who had trained for this moment for only 6 months, working alongside Vantiri officers who had spent their entire lives fighting a war humanity had only just joined. Threll stood beside her on the bridge, having requested and been granted a place aboard the human flagship for this engagement, a decision that had required its own difficult negotiation with Vantiri command back home. "Admiral, I want you to know, whatever happens in the days ahead, My people are grateful beyond words for what your species has done in these 6 months. No ally we have ever found has prepared this quickly, or fought this hard, for a war that began as someone else's. It stopped being someone else's war the moment your scout ship spotted us, Reyes said, her eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the approaching Hollow fleet, still days away, but growing closer with every passing hour. Besides, I made a promise to 211 people 31 years ago that I intended to bring them home safe. Some of them didn't make it. I'm not about to let the rest of them, or anyone else on this planet, become another name on a list I have to carry for the rest of my life. Down on Earth, in cities across the globe, people gathered in front of screens, watching live coverage of the approaching fleet, some praying, some protesting, most simply waiting in the particular kind of silence that comes when a species realizes, all at once, that survival is no longer guaranteed by default. In Nevada, at the very spot where the alien ship had first landed 9 months before, a small memorial had been built, honoring the 29 crew members of the Kestrel who had not survived the long years of stasis. Fresh flowers had been placed there that morning by families who now understood, in a way they had not fully grasped before, exactly how much their loved ones had already sacrificed, and exactly what price might still be asked of everyone else. 11 days. That was all the time Earth had left before finding out whether 6 months of frantic preparation, built on a foundation of decades-old debt and a fragile new alliance, would be enough to save the planet from a war that had been coming, unseen, since long before anyone in that Nevada desert had ever looked up and noticed a strange ship falling gently out of a clear blue sky. A Vantiri relief fleet, summoned the moment Threll reported the incursion, arrived at the edge of the solar system just hours ahead of the enemy, 70 ships strong, racing across distances that should have taken weeks to cross, using drive technology that pushed even Vantiri engineering close to its limits. It was not enough ships to win alone, and everyone on the combined command staff knew it, but it was enough to buy Earth's fleet the one thing it desperately needed: time to finish forming up, and confirmation that the alliance humanity had gambled on was real, standing beside them exactly when it mattered most. Admiral Reyes watched the tactical display from the bridge of her flagship as the two fleets, human and Vantiri, moved into a combined formation designed over months of joint training. A formation that blended Vantiri long-range coordination with human close support tactics, exactly the fusion of philosophies that Threll and Reyes had discussed back in the 4th month of preparation. Enemy fleet count confirmed, the tactical officer reported, his voice tight but steady. 58 vessels. Formation suggests they are expecting minimal resistance. Then let's make sure they're wrong about that, Reyes said. The battle began at extreme range, Vantiri long-range weapons opening fire first, exactly as doctrine called for, softening the leading edge of the hollow formation before the enemy could close to effective combat distance. The hollow response was immediate and characteristically relentless, their entire fleet surging forward without hesitation, seemingly unconcerned by the losses inflicted on their lead ships. It was exactly the tactic Threll had described months earlier, an enemy that did not calculate acceptable losses the way any human or Vantiri commander would, an enemy that simply kept coming. They're not slowing down, the tactical officer said. Recommend controlled withdrawal to secondary formation, per Vantiri doctrine. Belay that, Reyes said. Hold the line. Human ships, form up on my position. We're not giving them the center. Threll, standing beside her, tensed visibly at the order. Old instincts from decades of hollow warfare pulling hard against what was being asked. But this time, instead of objecting, Threll simply nodded, trusting the doctrine that months of joint training had built, trusting the same instinct that had once led a badly damaged human ship to hold a line for 11 hours above a burning colony. Signal the Vantiri fleet, Threll said to the communications officer. Tell them to trust the humans' position. Tell them we hold together, or we do not hold at all. What followed was, by every account given afterward, 11 of the longest hours in the history of both species, a brutal, grinding engagement fought across the outer edge of the solar system, close enough to Earth that ordinary citizens with home telescopes could occasionally catch faint flashes of distant weapons fire against the black of space. Ships were lost on both sides. The Hollow fleet, true to every warning Threll had given, showed no sign of retreating, even as its numbers steadily dwindled, throwing itself against the combined human-Vantiri line again and again. It was on the 9th hour, with both fleets battered and exhausted, human ships running dangerously low on ammunition, and Vantiri ships nursing critical damage across nearly every hull, that Admiral Reyes made the decision that would later be studied in military academies on both worlds for generations. Tactical, show me the hollow flagship, the big one, center of their formation. Here, Admiral. It's held back the entire engagement, hasn't fired directly, seems to be coordinating the rest of the fleet. That's their command ship, Reyes said, studying the display carefully. Cut the head off, the rest of that formation loses coordination. I've seen it happen before, 31 years ago, just on a smaller scale. Admiral, reaching that ship means punching through their strongest concentration of remaining forces. We'd be exposing the fleet's flank to do it. I know, Reyes said. Threll, what's your read? Threll studied the tactical display for a long moment, weighing decades of Vantiri caution against everything the last 6 months had taught about how humans fought when the stakes demanded it. Vantiri doctrine would call this too great a risk. But I have learned, Admiral, that your species sometimes sees a path to victory that caution alone cannot find. I trust your judgment. Reyes nodded once, then gave the order that committed nearly every remaining human ship to a single, coordinated strike, aimed directly at the heart of the hollow formation. It was a maneuver built from 6 months of blended doctrine, human ships driving forward in tight, mutually supporting formation, while Vantiri long-range weapons provided covering fire from the flanks, a combination that neither species could have executed alone, but that together proved devastating. The strike reached the hollow flagship in the 10th hour of the battle. What happened in the final exchange was later reconstructed from sensor logs rather than any single clear account, a chaotic, close-range engagement that cost Earth 3 more ships and their crews, but that ended with the massive dark hull of the hollow command vessel breaking apart in a silent, brilliant flash of light, visible even from Earth's surface, as a faint new star, appearing briefly in the night sky. Exactly as Threll had predicted, the rest of the hollow fleet, suddenly without central coordination, began to falter. Formations that had pressed forward with terrifying, mindless persistence for 9 hours suddenly scattered, some vessels continuing to fight in isolated, disorganized clusters, others turning and attempting to flee back toward deep space. By the end of the 11th hour, the battle was over. Of the 58 hollow ships that had entered the solar system, 41 had been destroyed. The remaining 17 retreated, pursued partway by Vantiri ships before Admiral Reyes recalled the pursuit, unwilling to risk further losses chasing a broken enemy far from reinforcement. The cost had been heavy, 12 human ships lost, along with over 3,000 crew members, 9 Vantiri ships lost as well. But Earth had held, and more importantly, Earth had held together with its new ally, exactly as the fragile alliance forged 9 months earlier had hoped it might. The celebrations that followed across Earth were tempered by grief for the lives lost, but they were celebrations nonetheless, the largest simultaneous gathering of humanity in recorded history, cities from every continent filling streets and public squares to watch news coverage of the victorious fleet returning to Earth orbit. Admiral Reyes, exhausted and injured, her flagship scarred nearly beyond recognition, stood before cameras upon her return and gave a short statement that would be quoted for decades afterward. 31 years ago, my crew and I made a choice to hold a line we probably shouldn't have held for people we had never met, because it was the right thing to do. We paid a price for that choice. Today, this planet made a similar choice, in less time than anyone thought possible, and we paid a price for it too. I won't pretend the cost was small. 3,000 people didn't come home tonight, and their families deserve better than empty words from me. But I will say this. We held the line, and because we held it together, with allies who trusted us as much as we learned to trust them, Earth is still here tonight, and so is the future all of us get to build together. In the weeks that followed, the alliance between Earth and the Vantiri coalition deepened rapidly, no longer a cautious, limited agreement, but a full partnership between two species who had now bled together in the same fight. Joint shipyards expanded. Human engineers, now working directly alongside Vantiri counterparts with full trust, rather than careful diplomatic distance, began contributing genuine innovations to the alliance's combined technology, blending human ingenuity with Vantiri experience, in ways that surprised even Threll, who had spent decades among the stars and thought there was little left to surprise him. Threll remained on Earth for several more months, working closely with Admiral Reyes and the surviving Kestrel crew to help plan the next phase of the Alliance, preparing for the real possibility that this had been only the opening battle in a much longer war. Standing beside Reyes one evening at the same Nevada memorial site where the alien ship had first landed, now expanded to honor both the Kestrel's original crew and the 3,000 who had died defending the solar system, Threll spoke quietly, almost to itself. When I first proposed returning your ship, my superiors questioned whether it was wise. Some believed we should simply study the technology and leave the crew in stasis, a resource preserved rather than a debt repaid. I insisted otherwise. I told them that a species capable of the choice your crew made deserved to be treated with honesty and respect, not calculation. Threll turned to look at Reyes. I did not expect, when I made that argument, that it would lead to this. An entire species standing beside mine, less than a year later, in the middle of a war that has already claimed so much from both of us. Would you do it differently, if you could go back? Reyes asked, knowing what it would cost us both? Threll considered the question with the same careful seriousness it brought to every difficult conversation. No, it finally said. I would not. Because I believe, Admiral, that what we have built together in these months, however costly, gives both our peoples something neither of us had before. A chance, not a guarantee, not an easy path, but a real chance against an enemy that has, until now, always seemed unstoppable. That is worth more than any price we have paid so far, and I suspect it will be worth more than any price still to come. Above them, the desert sky had turned dark. Stars scattered across the black in their familiar endless patterns. The same sky that had once seemed distant and untouchable to nearly everyone standing at that memorial. It did not feel distant anymore. It felt, for the first time in human history, like a place that belonged to Earth as much as any ocean or continent, a frontier that humanity had been thrown into far sooner than anyone expected, but one it had met, in the end, exactly as it always had, every hard and impossible test that came before it. Not with certainty, not without cost, but together, and without ever once considering the possibility of simply walking away. The war with the Hollow was far from over. Everyone standing in that desert that night understood as much. But for the first time since a strange, glowing ship had fallen gently out of a clear blue sky 9 months earlier, humanity did not face what was coming alone, and somewhere among the stars, on worlds humans had never seen, and would likely never visit, Vantiri families who had once lost hope of ever finding a true ally were teaching their children a new story, one about a small young species from a distant blue world that had looked at an impossible fight and chosen, without hesitation, to stand and hold the line.